My grandmother treated me like my mother's ghost, even calling me by her name. I locked my door, terrified, and fought to escape. It has been 10 years since I last spoke to or saw my grandmother. When I was 12, I was sent out of state to visit her for about a week. At that point, I had not seen her since I was 8 when my mother, her daughter, passed away. However, I would occasionally talk to her on the phone and write to her. She lives far enough away that I must take a plane to see her. This was my first experience flying alone without an adult, but I managed quite well, with the assistance of some airport employees. My grandmother picked me up at the airport, and as I entered the car, I sensed something was decidedly off. Her manner of speaking to me felt strange, almost as if I were an object rather than her granddaughter. She used phrases like, "You're a pretty little thing," and remarks of that nature. Things took a dramatic turn after that. When we arrived at her house, it was completely transformed. The living room had become a shrine to my mother, adorned with large pictures, crosses, ashes, my mother's belongings, the full spectrum, and everything else resembled her home from decades past. Unsure of what to say or do, I went upstairs to what I presumed would be a guest bedroom, only to discover that my grandmother had meticulously recreated my mother's old bedroom. I didn't know how to react. It was simply overwhelming for me. Fortunately, it was getting late, so I told my grandmother I needed to take a shower and go to bed. After showering and preparing for bed in the bathroom, I finished getting dressed in my pajamas and returned to the bedroom, only to find that my suitcase was missing. Panic struck me. I asked my grandmother if she had seen my luggage, but she claimed she had no idea what I was referring to and insisted she had never seen any suitcase with me, clearly a delusion on her part. I did not pursue the matter further and decided to go to bed. Sleep was elusive due to my fear of my grandmother, so I lay in bed in the dark, trying to distract myself from my terror. I then heard the door slowly creak open and could hear my grandmother walking close to the bed, humming to herself. I remained perfectly still in bed, utterly frozen with fear. For about 20 minutes, she stood there watching me and humming, before finally leaving. When I felt it was safe, I got up to close the door and then essentially slept in front of it to block it. During the following nights, I made sure to lock my door before going to sleep. The next morning, my grandmother was in the kitchen acting normal, cooking breakfast. I once again asked her if she had seen my clothes, and she reiterated that she had not but suggested I wear the clothes that were in the room, my mother's old clothes. I went upstairs and found a seemingly normal outfit, a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. When I returned downstairs, my grandmother beamed and exclaimed, "Oh, there's my sweet Selena." I felt nauseous. That just so happens to be my mother's name. I was utterly terrified. I had never experienced anything like this before. I sat down to eat breakfast and acted as if everything was normal until my grandmother left me to do something. She went outside to tend to her garden, and I seized the opportunity to call my parents. I attempted to explain to them what was occurring as best as I could, how uncomfortable I felt, and how desperate I was to return home. They thought I was exaggerating or being untruthful and insisted I should just endure it, reminding me that it was only for a week. I felt completely powerless. Essentially, I shifted into survival mode, aiming simply to endure the week and return home. I tried to spend as much time alone as possible. I read in my room, jogged around the neighborhood, and told my grandmother I needed to focus on schoolwork. I had brought with me anything to secure some solitary time. This strategy worked fairly well for about 3 days. I managed to make the time pass as quickly as possible while keeping to myself. On the 3rd day, however, she lost control. While we were driving, she began to cry hysterically and questioned why I was abandoning her, claiming that she would seek custody of me. She insisted she would inform Child Protective Services that my father was a danger, which he was not, and because my stepmother did not adopt me, I would be living with her from that point onwards. I was terrified. I was shaking. She drove recklessly, and I urged her to return home. Instead, she drove in circles until I threatened to jump out of the car unless she took me home. Upon returning home, I went straight to the room I was staying in, locked the door, and placed myself in front of it to listen for her movements. I heard her walking up the stairs, humming to herself and calling for me by my mother's name. I did not respond. I could hear her right outside the door, but she was silent otherwise. I felt utterly terrified. She lingered there for an hour before finally retreating to her room. I waited until after midnight to leave my room, knowing my grandmother would be asleep. I called my parents again, using the landline in the kitchen. My stepmother answered, and I informed her that my grandmother was completely unhinged and that I needed to return home. She told me I was only there for another day and a half and that she wouldn't arrange an earlier flight for me. I was filled with anger and frustration toward my stepmother. I felt like I couldn't endure another moment in that house. My grandmother was upstairs, and not wanting to face her, I went into the basement for solitude. While searching, I discovered many items my family and I could not locate in the estate after my mother's passing, and to my surprise, I even found my suitcase. I grabbed it and ascended the stairs. I hurriedly locked myself in my room after running upstairs. I heard my grandmother emerge from her room and approach mine. She stood there for a couple of hours, humming softly. I changed into my real clothes and remained in that room for the entire day. I didn't eat or drink anything. I simply didn't feel safe. Occasionally, I heard my grandmother moving around the house, humming softly, and then returning to my door, just waiting. I spent the entire night sitting in front of that door, eventually falling asleep there. Finally, the morning arrived when I could go home. I was anxious, knowing I had hours before my flight. However, I just wanted to get to the airport as soon as possible. I prepared my belongings, most of what I had was already packed. I could hear my grandmother downstairs making breakfast. By this point, I was starving. I felt like I was being tortured as time dragged on, with food so close yet seemingly unattainable. I stayed put, counting the fibers in the carpet. At last, it was time to leave, and I felt an electric surge of energy compelling me to open my bedroom door. I did so, carrying my luggage that I had found in the basement, and walked downstairs to find my grandmother. She sat in her living room, which was once again a shrine to my mother. She looked at me and said, "Good morning, Selena." I simply told her it was time to take me to the airport. She then took an excruciating 45 minutes to get ready while I waited at the door. It felt like stalling. I urged her once more that we needed to leave. Eventually, she came downstairs and we got in the car, but she started driving in the wrong direction. I alerted her, and she turned around, only to miss another turn. This continued for about 20 minutes until I finally broke down and started screaming. I threw open the car door and threatened to jump out if she didn't just drive me to the airport. She began to cry but ultimately drove, albeit very recklessly. We arrived at the airport an hour later than planned, and only 30 minutes before boarding. I was fortunate that, as a minor, some airport staff noticed I had been crying and assisted me through security and to my gate. I owe everything to those individuals. I was the last passenger to board my plane, but I made it. For the first time in a week, I felt safe, and tears streamed down my face. Since then, I have had no further contact with my grandmother. Other family members remain in her life. It took me years to forgive my parents for not rescuing me from that situation. They now express regret for leaving me there. Our relationship continues to be strained. Story 2. I got fired for a mistake I didn't make. But I discovered my employer mishandled my job security clause, and they settled with me. OMG. This incident occurred approximately 2 decades ago while I was in university. I am purposefully vague due to various reasons. Background: I obtained a position essentially as an office attendant on weekends. I arrived at 8 a.m. and checked things periodically each hour, managed the occasional phone call, and then departed when the 4 p.m. staff member arrived. Most of the time, I read, watched television, or played games on my laptop. I likely worked no more than 10 minutes each hour unless an issue arose. This arrangement continued for several years. The compensation was reasonable, holiday pay was doubled, and I even had chances to cover weekday shifts when others were unwell. One day, while I was covering the midday shift, my supervisor requested that I come to his office. He informed me that the evening weekday position would become available that night and offered it to me, which I accepted. I was instructed to punch out and return at 5 p.m. that evening. The reasoning behind this should be apparent. Initially, things went smoothly. I arrived at 4 p.m., completed the usual tasks, and left at midnight when my replacement came in. The job involved slightly more responsibility and a higher volume of calls. However, after 9 months, things began to deteriorate. The daytime employee developed a significant attitude problem and transformed from a pleasant individual into a complete nuisance. She complained about everything I did. For example, when a system malfunction occurred at her remote location, she contacted them. 5 hours later, I noticed that the issue still persisted, so I made another call to check if they were still working on it or if there was another problem since the woman on our side who could assist them would soon be leaving. They indeed had an issue, and I connected them with the necessary support. My reward for ensuring that the problem was resolved without necessitating a call to a senior employee at home on a Friday after just leaving work. I was yelled at because she claimed that I had ignored her log entry regarding the issue. My explanation was disregarded. My supervisor instructed me to highlight significant items in the log to prove that I had read them. Things continued in this new normal for a while. I walked on eggshells around her when necessary, grateful that my interactions with her only lasted for a maximum of 5 minutes. I complied with her ridiculous highlighting requests, and my log entries became increasingly detailed, even including references to her calls when I had to follow up on issues that spanned shifts. The termination. The subsequent summer, just after reaching my 1-year mark, I went on vacation to see some friends out of state. When I returned, a week later, my supervisor approached me after everyone else had left and requested that I explain how I completed a specific task that involved certain updates. I detailed my process to him. He then informed me that I had not been executing this task correctly and that he was terminating my employment. I had mistakenly switched the date code of the English file with that of the French file, which was the previous version. The most recent version had already been implemented, so there was no actual issue. It was merely an excuse to let me go. As I departed the office, I remembered that my state follows, at will, employment laws, meaning I can resign at any time for any reason while my employer can terminate my employment at any time for any reason. The only exceptions involve state and federal laws regarding discrimination based on race, religion, etc. I thought I was in a difficult spot, so I began applying for positions everywhere. During my job search, I fortuitously stumbled upon a link related to employment law. Out of curiosity, I read it and found that my employer had inadvertently undermined themselves. Within the employee handbook, there was a job security clause. This clause stated that they would never lay us off if our positions were eliminated. Instead, we would simply be retrained and reassigned to fill another opening in the company. While it sounded beneficial, it led to them fabricating reasons to terminate employees to circumvent this policy. However, their expensive lawyers had overlooked an important aspect. In my state, according to laws enacted by the legislature, I was classified as at will. They failed to acknowledge case law determined by the courts. The website cited a ruling from the state's Supreme Court that established that a job security clause nullified at will status for the employer, transitioning it to a just cause standard. This meant they needed a valid reason to terminate my employment. The retribution armed with this knowledge, I sought the counsel of a lawyer. Following my consultation, I collected evidence to support my case. My former supervisor was unaware that I possessed a greater understanding of the program than he did, as I used the same software on my own computer and laptop. I conducted tests. The date of the file, which was used against me, is inherently embedded in the version itself. I was able to show my lawyer that if I applied the same update repeatedly, which my former employer claimed would change the date daily, it actually would display the file's date. I demonstrated this by backdating my own copy by a year using the update archive from the vendor. Next, I illustrated how the task had previously been automated. A script would fetch the file and process it daily without human intervention. A change on the vendor's website disrupted the script's functionality. While fixing it was straightforward, nobody took the initiative to address it because the individual who had created it had retired. The required solution only involved deleting 3 characters from a single line in the script. Additionally, the task had been designated solely as a weekday responsibility. During my termination, I was informed how crucial this update was. If it was so vital, why was it not completed on weekends or holidays? The vendor also released updates then, as I demonstrated with an example from Christmas morning. Furthermore, why had the automation remained unfixed? With all this information, my lawyer reached out to them. After presenting them with evidence of their legal violation and the extensive documentation I had gathered, they were compelled to settle with me. Ultimately, their high-priced attorneys failed to conduct proper due diligence. I did. I am grateful to the remarkable librarians I have encountered throughout my life who instilled in me the skills of information literacy. These skills greatly benefited me in this situation. Summary: I was terminated by a major corporation and initially thought I had no options. Ultimately, I discovered that their lawyers overlooked a critical element in my state's laws, which compelled them to compensate me. Edit 1. Obviously, the details of the settlement are confidential and, to the best of my knowledge, still apply. It constituted a significant portion of my salary. I also received unemployment benefits during this period. I never learned how the aftermath unfolded since the primary corporate office involved was in another state, and I had no interaction with those individuals. I suspect a new handbook was likely issued before I received my settlement, so I feel sympathy for those who remained. Karen's future was determined roughly a year later. I came across a Facebook post from a former colleague stating that his job with them had ended, prompting me to inquire further. The company faced substantial revenue losses, resulting in Karen's termination as the site I had worked at was closed. From the approximately 50 employees in that office, only about 10 were reassigned to a different location. Thankfully, most of my preferred colleagues were of retirement age. It did not require much insight to recognize that my dismissal was merely a layoff disguised as a termination. Story 3. My girlfriend wants our friend to dye her hair pink. She freaked over a girl with red braids, making me question everything. WTF. I am currently sharing this while at school, so I will not be able to check notifications. However, I wanted to share something. Just a few moments ago, during lunch, I was with my friends and my girlfriend. I love my girlfriend deeply. She is truly the most amazing and wonderful partner I have ever had. She makes me feel appreciated and valued. But recently she has started mentioning how girls or anyone with red or pink hair is incredibly attractive to her, and she seems to really admire them. I don't mind that she likes people with red or pink hair. I genuinely think it looks nice on others. However, what bothers me is that she asked a mutual friend, whom I will refer to as friend 1, to dye her hair pink. To provide some context, she and friend 1 have been very close since elementary school. I was introduced to friend 1 in 8th grade, while I met my girlfriend in freshman year. Hence, we have all been friends for a substantial amount of time. However, when my girlfriend and I started dating, friend 1 became very close to her, which led to a disagreement between my girlfriend and me. Ultimately, we both agreed to establish some boundaries regarding friend 1. I don't believe my girlfriend has enforced those boundaries, as she spent the weekend at friend 1 home, which I don't mind, but what unsettled me was that they shared a bed. Back to lunch while I, friend 1, my girlfriend, and another mutual friend, let's call them friend 2, were simply hanging out, a random girl walked by. My girlfriend started smiling and appeared to get excited because the girl had red braids. That was when friend 1 remarked about my girlfriend saying, "She wants me to dye my hair pink," and to be honest, this felt odd to me. So I just smiled awkwardly and nodded, then returned to talking solely to friend 2. After the bell rang, I walked to class with a friend of mine. Now, I feel like I might be overreacting, but at the same time, I worry that my girlfriend may no longer have feelings for me and is just remaining in the relationship out of pity. Edit update hello again. I just want to express my gratitude to those who offered support. So, yesterday was day A, which meant I did not have any classes with my girlfriend, only with friend 1, who I will refer to as Scrooge, a nickname created by a friend. I did not engage in conversation with Scrooge except for a brief interaction in the morning when she practically inserted herself into my discussion with someone else. Throughout our second period, I did not speak to her at all. When it was time to leave, she quickly got up and exited building A. Our school consists of 4 buildings. When I followed her out of the same exit, she rushed into building B so quickly that she nearly collided with someone while swinging her backpack. I remained silent and waited for friend 2, whom I will call Cocktail. When Cocktail finally emerged from building B, he informed me that he just saw Scrooge. I remarked, "Yeah, she seems to be in quite a rush." That was the extent of our conversation as we walked around discussing the day's events while my girlfriend was actively avoiding me and hung out with none other than Scrooge. As school ended, I was with Cocktail and another mutual friend, whom I will refer to as Pina. We updated Pina about the situation because we mentioned we would fill her in. Pina then told us that she saw them walking closely next to each other. You know that feeling when you see two people walking side by side and can tell they're a couple because they are so close? That's how Pina described them, which naturally led me to wonder if something inappropriate occurred while my girlfriend was at Scrooge's house. Upon getting home, I texted my girlfriend to request a conversation. In retrospect, I feel like I could have approached it better. I sought Cocktail's opinion on our discussion, and he had a lot to share. I feel like I should talk to her, but I am unsure what to say, I expressed. It would be right to do so. If you do not know what to say, that is completely fine. Both of you need to express yourselves, sharing your thoughts and feelings, as well as how different situations affected you. Touch on any misunderstandings that may have troubled you, Cocktail advised. But I just don't know how to initiate the conversation, I replied. That's okay, I totally understand. If you're unsure of how to start, take some time for yourself. I realize this is stressful and challenging for you, Cocktail reassured me. Indeed, that clearly articulates your perspective. Just make sure to prepare backup reasons to clarify your thoughts, as this will prevent misunderstandings, Cocktail added. Okay, I agreed. After expressing my feelings to my girlfriend, I noticed she is now completely changing the subject. Oh God, I'm sorry she is avoiding the topic. Did she at least provide some explanation? Cocktail asked. I shared her text. If I didn't want to continue dating you, I wouldn't have put in so much effort to be with you. You have preferences too. All I wanted was for you to talk to me and share what's on your mind while I feel you're mad at me for having my phone off or for stepping away from the space we normally share. That is all she addressed, Cocktail questioned. Yes, I replied. I feel there should have been a lot more discussed. I then shared another message from my girlfriend. I wouldn't want you to alter who you are, even if I have a preference for certain things. I genuinely fell for you, not anyone else. I love you, and despite any preferences I may have, I will still love you. I dislike when people change, and I definitely don't want you to change. You are perfect just as you are. I recognize that I'm sometimes inconsiderate, but I would never want you to change for someone as trivial as me. I'm truly sorry about your situation. At least there's a starting point for the conversation, but it's still frustrating, Cocktail said sympathetically. Do I even have preferences? I wondered aloud. No, you've shown me a variety of men and women, and they are various types. It doesn't seem like there is a notable preference, Cocktail explained. Exactly, I replied. Yes, so I don't understand what she means by that, Cocktail remarked. I shared another message. Don't take the note as something negative but view it as my effort to communicate because I genuinely don't want you to change for me. However, if it makes you feel more comfortable, you may change. My preferences fluctuate constantly. It's just that you do not share your feelings with me, which leads me to overthink how to remedy our little issues so you're not upset with me anymore. I feel like I'm starting to change for you, but not for the better. Please don't quote me on this, as I might misinterpret things or glean incorrect insights, yet I didn't observe any changes besides you being upset and not communicating. While I understand that she is frustrated about your feelings, she seems to have avoided reaching out to you too, Cocktail commented. She doesn't reach out to me, I replied. It's always on me, I noted. The only effort she made in reaching out was sending me that note, I expressed. Oh, that was what it was. I expected more than just that. How frustrating, Cocktail said. I explained what was in the note while we were on the phone and also shared another message. All right then, I apologize. If you want to break up with me, you are free to do so, I responded. It's not that I want to end things. I believe we should take a break and reconnect once things settle down to ascertain where we stand and proceed from there. What terrible timing with the notifications I just received, Cocktail mentioned sadly. That's unfortunate, I replied. It's reasonable, though, Cocktail added. I am truly sorry about all of this. I hope it can be resolved soon, Cocktail said. Yes, I agreed. I know she is loyal, but I can't help but wonder, is she really? Why does she keep allowing Scrooge to challenge our boundaries? I contemplated. Yes, it reminds me of the situation with Jew and Brain all over again, and it's quite disheartening. I hope things do not regress into that territory, Cocktail stated. We ended up continuing our discussion over the phone. That's the latest update for now. Thank you once again. Story 4. 29F and 30M living together. Paranoid about his past social media habits. Backstory. I am a 29-year-old female, and he is a 30-year-old male. I have known him since we were in elementary school. He began following me on every social media platform back in 2021 and consistently liked or reacted to my photos and Instagram stories, even though I was in a relationship at the time. Despite this attention, I never acknowledged or responded to his reactions out of respect for my ex-partner, even though he was not the best. To be fair, my current boyfriend did not message me back then either, as he recognized I was in a relationship. He simply continued to react to my posts, and I was left with the impression that I was special. Fast forward, he was single for 5 years prior to starting to court me to become his serious and committed girlfriend. Meanwhile, I was nearly a year into my single status when we began dating over a year ago. Therefore, I decided to give him a chance since I had also admired him for quite some time. He is handsome, not extremely tall, but still taller than me, with attractive features such as tanned skin, beautiful eyes, intelligence, charisma, and a musical talent. As is often the case, we women tend to prefer men who are truly infatuated with us. In short, I was not in my home country when our conversations began. I was abroad for my studies and work. We commenced our relationship as a long-distance one, but would meet and bond for a maximum of 3 weeks every 3 months by flying to each other's continent alternately. This year, we took the significant step of moving in together, which had always been our plan. When we spent time together, he would regularly post about me on his social media accounts such as Facebook and Instagram, often without my prompting. He enjoyed showcasing me as his girlfriend. Subsequently, he made significant efforts to obtain a permanent visa to be with me, but unfortunately, his visa was denied 3 times. As a result, I returned home to do my part. It has been 5 months since we started living together, and while we experience our highs and lows, we ultimately enjoy each other's company. Issue. Referring back to my earlier story, I had believed that I was special because he was consistently reacting to my posts and stories. My main issue is, I assumed he only did this for a select few women. One day, I had some free time and randomly checked a few females following him. He had already unfollowed many on his own. I reviewed the profiles of women who still follow him and have public accounts, and I noticed him liking several photos on their feeds. I noted that he stopped reacting to their posts once we began talking. Although I am glad for him, the sheer number of girls he had previously liked raises doubts about his genuine interest in me. Some of these girls weren't even attractive, and I mentioned this to him during an argument while we were still in a long-distance setup. He assured me that he was single during that time, and I was the top girl he had a crush on, believing he never had a chance with me. Should I be okay with this? I knew he had been single for 5 years before we began talking, which eased my thoughts for a while. It's amusing how I was unfazed during our long-distance relationship, but now that we live together, my feelings of insecurity have surfaced. Particularly when I post our pictures on Instagram, he often asks me to collaborate, and as a result, I also get notifications regarding likes he receives from his followers, mostly females. I do not consider the women who are relatives or harmless friends of his, as I am familiar with them. However, it bothers me when I see women who I do not know, especially those with bikini pictures that seem rather lacking in class, liking our photos. It leaves me perplexed as to why they are still within his social media sphere. I remember asking him previously why he follows so many women. I would understand if they were Instagram influencers, famous actresses, or well-known vloggers, as I also admire such women. Yet, he seems to focus on ordinary girls like myself, with private accounts ranging from 800 to 1,000 followers, from various cities across our country. He explained that since he had been single for a considerable time, when he spoke with girls on dating apps, he would request to follow them on Instagram. In all honesty, it appears that those women followed him back. His follower count exceeds the number of people he follows, so he doesn't come across as creepy, unlike those guys who follow thousands but only have a handful of followers. Thank goodness for that, or I would be embarrassed. Regardless, even though he had every right to follow and flirt with girls in the past, he does not seem very diligent about unfollowing them. While I was abroad, I noticed a significant drop in his following. He used to follow 1,100 girls, but now it's down to 650. Although I did not request this change, I appreciate his attempt to reduce his following, although I have not explicitly mentioned it, as it seems like the bare minimum. I give him credit for his initiative, and I have also observed a similar decline in his Facebook following, which went from 2,000 to 900. Nevertheless, I find myself feeling paranoid and low-key, wish he would not unfollow anyone so that I could go through his phone and monitor whom he is following or adding as friends. I regret not taking the opportunity to check his following list before he unfollowed so many. Despite the reduction in his followers, I still notice other women liking our collaborative photos, even though he no longer follows them back. Who are these women, and how are they connected to my boyfriend? I never asked him about it, as that would seem toxic and invasive. I avoid borrowing his phone unless he requests me to check something while he is driving. On one occasion, I snooped on his phone and looked at his Facebook and Instagram accounts. He was not messaging any girls, liking their photos, or sending friend requests. Everything in his activity logs and explore pages was centered around sports and science. Therefore, I decided not to investigate any further to maintain my peace of mind. I apologize for the length of this message, but I needed to express my feelings. It's frustrating because I know I am attractive and in great shape, yet I still feel slightly insecure and jealous. Looks are fleeting, and what if he eventually seeks someone different? Every girl he once liked is still accessible to him on social media, which troubles me. Even though his following has decreased by around 40, I am not entirely satisfied, as there are still numerous women left. I often wonder how he knows all these women. When I asked him previously, he claimed he was extremely single and followed every woman suggested to him on Instagram. Some he knew personally, while others were strangers or people he met on dating apps. However, he assured me that he had never slept with any of the women from dating apps. He merely enjoyed chatting with them without intending to engage physically. He would only hook up with women he genuinely knew when he was single. It made sense then, but now it is puzzling to see so many women still interacting with his posts and stories, even though he has chosen to unfollow them. Why is that?